Hip-hop World Cup.
A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, relate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim.
Hip-hop World Cup.
When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the vinyl cassette or CD. So who will it be?
Hip-hop World Cup.
We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
Hip-hop World Cup.
Record shot. To the hip, the hop, you don't stop.
Hello and welcome to Hip Hop World Cup, the podcast that pits golden age hip hop albums against each other in a contest to find the ultimate champion. I'm your host Danny Phillips, and joining me in the Hip Hop World Cup studio are Steve Hitchcock. How are you, Steve?
Hi everyone, yeah, good, thanks.
And James Larry Luscombe. How are you?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very well, thanks.
All good, cool. So this week is a little bit different. We're on the road this week. We're positioned on Wembley Way in our special mobile unit that we've had specially constructed. Involves thousands of feet of cabling, huge monitors, and it's just like a pod that we're all in at the moment on the famous walkway just down from the Bobby Moore statue. So really excited about that. It makes no difference to you the listeners, but it's great for us because we're at the spiritual home of football. So it's great to be here, isn't it, lads? What are your thoughts about our new mobile pod?
Well, it's an honour to be at Wembley, isn't it? Like you said, it's the home of football, and hopefully we can do it justice.
Absolutely. So this year, this episode, we're looking at 1991. Full disclosure, this is my favourite year in hip hop. So many great albums. It's got 4 in my all-time top 10. 4 albums in my all-time top 10 in our shortlist, and that gives you an idea of how much I love this year. There are so many great albums, and even in my honourable mentions, there are some that are in my top 10. So this is my personal favourite year. What are your thoughts on 1991? Larry, start with you.
Yeah, not as strong for me actually. There were I struggled to come up with the shortlist, but like you, there are 2 albums in here that rank in my all-time top 3. And another one that I absolutely love. And of those 2 that are in my top 3, I really like. They've always been unranked, and they're still unranked in my mind. So if they come up against each other, I really don't know what I'm going to do and which way I'm going to come down.
Oh, I love that. And how about you, Steve?
Yeah, not one of my favourite years. I think I'm probably going the opposite of you two. There's a couple of albums that I do really like, but not in my probably not in my top 5, maybe some in my top 10. So I'm really interested to find out which ones you rank so highly, actually. It's going to be interesting. Yeah,
it is interesting. It's just that, I remember making a compilation of tracks from 1991. I just had so many, like I couldn't fit them all on one CD of my favourite tracks, like from this year. I just love it so much. I think it was just very much in the formative stages of my hip hop love. I was used to go out and buy the cassettes and stuff like that, and there just seemed to be so many great albums around at this particular time. I'm surprised you, Larry, when because this is Pete Tong's rap selection days, and there were so many tracks.
I mean, there are quite a few like singles I can remember from the year, but I don't know. I just kind of think I don't think I really had many of these at the time, apart from NWA, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
And I can really remember you and I like loving the NWA album and listening to it on the way to school and stuff like that. But apart from that, I don't really have. I think I was probably just still into the stuff that I had, like Straight Outta Compton and the Public Enemy albums and stuff like that had kind of previously been like come out the previous couple of years and just still stuck on those maybe.
Yeah, still digesting those ones. Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, look, it's going to be an exciting one to find out what some of these albums are. Just a very, very quick recap on the rules. What we've done is we've whittled it down to our favourite 8 albums from 1991 using a technique and a process that I still don't understand. But we've got it down to 8 albums, our favourite 8. And what we're going to do, we're going to draw them out the hat against each other, and they'll play each other in round 1. The winners go through to the semi-finals, and the winners of that obviously go through to the final, and then they play, and we find out our ultimate album from this year. So I hope Tru-Skore has been working hard this week. Larry, I I hear it was in the news this week. I saw something about it taking over webcams or something.
I can't really comment on that. I mean, we've had as you'll recall, sort of the last episode, it worked. It was being worked so hard that it was pumping out sort of black, acrid smoke. I think it's been fixed now. The problem with it is because it's a hybrid system. It's the like the chipset, like the musical processing unit is like a really modern Intel system, but the machine that houses it is like an adapted like British Leyland machine from the early 70s. So yeah, it's quite
pretty durable.
But I've had to flush the pipes through this week, and
I wondered what
replaced.
I wondered what that was sticking out the top of it. So that must be okay.
It's one of the gearboxes is gone a bit funny, but it should be okay. Like,
yeah, good. Okay,
keep off the clutch, and it'll be fine. I think.
Nice.
Danny, what happened to your rival system? Did that get shut down, or is that going to make a comeback?
There are a few teething problems. I got some letters. I won't lie to you this week. Very strongly worded letters. So I'm going to carry on using it until I'm like a court tells me I can't use it. But until then, I'm going to keep using the real rank system because it's all I've got. Okay. So let's see how it gets on this week. But anyway, so before we get on to telling you what the lineup is, just a quick surprise for you guys. I've got a special guest lined up at the end of the show, just after the final, to talk about the winner, like we did last time. This time it's a genuine England legend. I'm not going to say any more than that. A genuine England football legend will be joining us on the line live to give us his thoughts on the winner. So stay tuned.
Is he on a reliable telephone?
I believe so. We've done some tests, and I believe it's reliable this week. So let's see how we get on. But
I so hope it's Darren Anderton.
Well, I'm not going to say, but just please stay tuned for that. It's going to be absolutely dynamite. So, okay, so the 8 albums we've got going through to the Hip Hop World Cup finals are A Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory, Black Sheep's A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, De La Soul is Dead, Del the Funkee Homosapiens, I Wish My Brother George Was Here, Ice Cube, Death Certificate, Ice-T's OG Original Gangster, KMD's Mr. Hood, and F of 4 Zaggin by NWA. So that's a very strong lineup of 8 there. Quick thoughts before we go into the round one?
Yes, it's a strong lineup, isn't it? I don't think this is a classic year, but that's a really strong lineup. I think I'm going to struggle to choose between some of those albums.
Absolutely. And Larry, what are your thoughts quickly on the lineup?
There are definitely some that I'm going to really struggle with, but I can't lie, there are also some in there that just I don't connect with at all. So that they will be easy rounds for me.
Yeah. Foregone conclusions.
Hip Hop World Cup, round 1. Hip Hop World Cup, round 1. Hip Hop World Cup, round 1. Hip Hop World Cup, round 1.
Okay, cool. Right, so without further ado, let's get on to the draw. Who have you got over there helping you with it this week, Steve?
Well, you're in for a big surprise, actually. So, I don't want the listeners to think that we don't kind of spare any expense for this Hip Hop World Cup, especially in your favourite year, Danny. So what I've been doing, I've been trying to think of a legal way to get Tupac into this World Cup, because there's no way he's going to get into it otherwise. So I looked on eBay, and it last made an appearance at Coachella 2012. It's a hologram machine, and it's been loaded with a hologram of Tupac. Now, it's not working brilliantly. It doesn't speak, which is, coincidence. And it just keeps on throwing up gang signs, West Side gang signs. So,
and also, being comprised of light, probably can't actually interact with the balls.
No, it's got a special robotic arm that I had to pay extra for that. I think that was probably used by Snoop Dogg for like rolling spliffs or something. But it's
move.
Absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary.
So there we go. So the hologram of Tupac is going to be helping me do the draw this evening.
Fantastic. It's a real tragedy that people at home can't see this, because it's stunning. He's got the bandana on. He's doing a little dance. It's absolutely extraordinary.
I can't help but feel that do we need to spend the money on it? If people can't see it,
well, we can see it though.
It seems daft.
I mean, we can see it. It helps us. I'm not sure. We might need some sort of independent verification. I'm not sure if it will be binding by FIFA rules and regulations. We'll have to deal with that later. But for us, it's absolutely spectacular.
Right, he's ready to go. He's ready.
Cool. Right, well, let's go. We got Tupac holding the ball bag. Let's see who comes out first match, round 1.
Okay, first out, it's Del the Funkee Homosapien.
Ooh.
And going against Del is it's Mr. Hood by KMD.
KMD, Mr. Hood versus Del the Funkee Homosapiens. I wish my brother George was here.
Actually.
Yeah. Two kind of similar albums in tone, let's say, I reckon. There.
Yeah,
but, Steve, so you're up first on this one. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Like you say, two kind of fun albums, really. Both debut albums. So let's start with Del. Del, I think Del is a great rapper. I really like Del. And this album, it's like when I first listened to this album, it didn't really kind of catch me. I wasn't like really massively into it. I think I prefer his other stuff. I love like Deltron 3030 and No Need for Alarm. I think those are fantastic albums. But going back and listen to this album, it is really good. It is so funky. So it's like quite a stylish, funky album, and I think it's aged really well. And actually, I've really enjoyed listening to it all the way through. I like albums that are good long players, and I think this one really is. I think it starts fantastically well with What Is a Booty, and then there's 3 absolute classic tracks on there. Mr. Dobalino, which everyone will probably say, but I love a 1-2. That is just my favourite track on the album. I can play that all day long, and I like Sunny Meadows. I don't know if you two.
I love Sunny Meadows.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
There's something very kind of subtle and stylish about it. So, really, really strong album. Definitely one that's grown on me over the years. And then the KMD album, full disclosure, I absolutely love MF Doom. So this album's got kind of provenance for me. And it's slightly different from the other albums this year. It's like, it feels like it had a kind of different production, a different vibe to it. And the rhyming's quite clever. The skits are quite amusing, whereas some skits in this year are just absolutely awful. And I don't know, I think this has got more tracks that I like on it, I think. I don't think it kind of has the same kind of cohesive feel as I Wish My Brother George Was Here, but I really like Who Me, Hum Rush, Nitty Gritty is obviously a really classic track. Heart With No Hoe, Peach Fuzz, and the Gas Face Refill at the end. So there's always something on this album that I'm kind of looking forward to hearing, even though every track might not be as strong as perhaps the ones on Dale's album. So I'm gonna hear what you two have to say, and it's kind of like, this is definitely in the balance for me. I'm gonna find this one a tricky one to decide.
Yeah, a really tough kind of war of attrition in the first round there. What a tricky one to tease out. How about you, Larry? What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, the Del album I came to sort of a bit late in life, I think. I'm not quite sure why I didn't have it back in the day. I'm pretty sure I would have loved it originally, but I think I actually first came across it in your car, like listening to What Is Booty, just asking you what it was, being sort of incredulous that I didn't know what it was. But
the word booty?
Sorry?
You mean the word booty or that song?
The song, What Is Booty?
Oh, right.
Is it called What Is Booty?
What is a booty?
What is a booty, sorry.
Yeah.
So that would have been sort of early 2000s, and I've had it since then and have kind of always been really into it. I've actually got a bit of a kind of theory that if somebody didn't know, if someone wanted to kind of have a really good example of hip hop to get them into it, I think this is kind of like the perfect album to give somebody like that. I think if you don't like this, like hip hop probably just isn't for you at all. it's really fun sounding, like really funky. You can't help but nod your head to all the beats. It's like really danceable, quite a sort of a bit of a sort of party album. It's got songs about, you know, like getting the bus or having like an unwelcome guest sleeping on your sofa, and like really daft things like that.
Don't always hear that sort of thing in hip hop, do you?
Exactly. It strays away from like subject matter, especially like back in 1990. A lot of it was either really political or kind of about street violence and things like that, and you could see how it put people off. But there's just barely any of that here at all. Like musically, it's just kind of got loads of brilliant hooks, memorable lyrics, funky beats. Obviously, really heavily indebted to like George Clinton throughout, as a lot of albums from this period are. It does kind of dip a little bit at the end. I don't especially like Hoods Come in Dozens and Same Old Thing. They're not quite on the same level as the rest of it. But yeah, it's just a really consistently good, fun album. He's really charismatic. And yeah, I just always look forward to listening to it, really. Mr. Hood, again, I didn't know of it back in 91. I only kind of became aware of it having got into MF Doom sort of in the early 2000s, and then, you know, realising that he'd been in this group earlier, KMD, and sort of wanted to check that out. I don't know sort of really how I would have responded to it back then. I think, although it's got some great tracks on it, as we mentioned before, it is quite well matched to I Wish My Brother George Was Here. They're sort of two quite sort of similar sounding albums, but I just think the Dell album stands the test of time a bit better. I think, like, I don't know, Mr. Hood is a bit front loaded. I kind of lose interest about halfway through from, I guess, like The Boy Who Cried Wolf onwards. Just doesn't quite have the consistency. I think one thing that I do absolutely love about it is the skits. They've obviously kind of found this like teach yourself English record, and they've just mined it for this kind of like to build this character of Mr. Hood out of, but they do it in such a clever way, like weaving this like dialogue between him and like the band members into these really, really funny little dialogues.
It's mostly Onyx, the Birthstone Kid, isn't it? It's quite funny.
Yeah. Some really great kind of lines in those. Like whereas like most skits in hip hop are just a bit tiresome, like these ones are genuinely good, I think. And MF Doom, Stroke X has kind of always been good with the skits. But
yeah,
I have to say, I don't think the rapping is particularly great on this album, like especially when you compare it to a lot of the other stuff on offer this year. I think it took him becoming MF Doom to kind of really find his place as one of the all-time greats. I don't think you can really see that. You wouldn't have guessed from this that he would go on to be such a legend, I don't think. But
I didn't even know which one he was.
Yeah, it is a bit kind of hard to pick him out, like, to be honest, unless you kind of really know what to look out for. But I was a bit disappointed listening to this again, because I thought I liked it a bit more than I did, perhaps. But I much prefer their second album, actually. It's a shame that we won't get to speak about that one. It wasn't released officially until sort of much later. But a good first round. And a good matchup between the two, I think.
Interesting stuff. Just coming on to my thoughts on this. Without wishing to strip the jeopardy out of the situation, we've unearthed one of my top 10 of all time albums in Del the Funkee Homosapien against an album that I heard for the first time this week. So I think it might be, the dictionary definition of a foregone conclusion with this, but I will speak about.
I thought you did have Mr. Hood.
No, never had it. Never. I would have heard of it. I just hadn't listened to it until I was forced to this week. But having listened to it, I spent a good time listening to it this week, and I think it's a good album. I think had I listened to this in 1991, I think it would have been an album I would have loved, actually. I think it's right on my street. I think it's full of, it's funky, it's sample heavy, it's fun, it's upbeat, it's got some really great kind of energy behind it. and I think I like that a lot. They're at the time they were associated with Third Bass, and I think they were on the Third Bass's first album, gas-faced stuff, I think, and hence why one of these is the gas-face. So I was aware of them through that, and like their contribution on that. And I think they're very similar. Like, this sounded like a Third Bass album to me. Lots of sort of cartoony skits, a lot of samples, just, loads thrown at the wall to see what sticks. And I think it's really good. A lot of those skits you were talking about, I lost patience with those quite early on. They annoyed me. In fact, the first track that comes in is a glorified skit, really, isn't it? And I just don't think that's a strong enough opening for an album. I was kind of like, didn't grab me from the start.
I really like it.
Yeah, I mean, I sense the people who like this album like that skit, but I just come into it now, I just wasn't feeling it. But then as the songs kept going through, I really kind of got into it. I like the production style. I think some of it's Stimulated Dummies, who I'm quite big fans of. And yeah, I mean, it's like an A to Z of all the breaks that were being used around that time. All the classic breaks, lots of energy, good rapping. Could have done without Banana Peel Blues. That would be like a bit of a waste of time on that one. As I say, Peach Fuzz I really loved as well. That's right up my street with the sort of jazzy sample and that sort of thing. So I get why a lot of people like them, and this album is kind of like loved by people. But again, it's got the disadvantage of me not having listened to it before. Whereas on the flip side, I mean, Del the Funkee Homosapiens album, it's a stone cold top tenner for me. I absolutely love this album. It's so strong from start to finish, and every track, even the weaker tracks, like you say, Larry, Same Old Thing is probably the weakest track. Still love it. It's just hit after hit after hit. And the production on it, it's kind of got that Boogeymen, DJ Pooh, Sir Jinx style, Ice Cube style, where the samples are really crunchy, but they're really funky. Lots of P-Funk influence on this. Not quite as much as Dr. Bombay's obviously influenced in What Is a Booty, but a lot of them are, there's not as much P-Funk in this as I sort of remember. But Del's lyricism on this is phenomenal. I mean, the Wacky World of Rapid Transit with the bus, his flow on that is incredible. Just, it's the lyrical dexterity he displays on that. Just talking about catching the bus, and it's testament to this album that so many of the tracks, I know bits of it, I can quote bits of it, I remember them, and I often think of them, like the lyrics and stuff like that. It's such a memorable, strong album. I think this is a pretty easy one for me in terms of the matchup. I think we should probably just vote on it then, really, shouldn't we? Steve, let's go for you first. What are you voting for?
I still can't properly decide. So my head says Dale's album is the best one. And Larry, I really like what you said about, if you were new to hip hop, this would be a really good album, because I think when I first listened to it, I was into like harder stuff, and so I didn't appreciate it as much. Whereas now I probably don't listen to that
I was
stuff as much.
Actually.
So it's kind of making me think though, actually, do I actually really like the KMD album more? And there's definitely way more tracks on there that I think are like better tracks. On my kind of list, I've got like six tracks I really like on Mr. Hood, but only 3 that I'd say are really, really great on I Wish My Brother George Was Here. So I'm massively on the fence here. Do you know what? I'm going to go for KMD because it's got Zeb Love X on there. So there we go. I'm just going to go for it.
Radical decision there. Larry, let's go for you next.
Yeah, this is kind of quite easy for me, really. I think, like you, I think the Del album is probably in my top 10. Like it's been a while since I've kind of revised my top 10, but I think it's either in it or very close to it. And it's such a fun album. I never tire of. There's nothing to not like about it, really.
Larry, I'm shocked.
Really? Oh no,
I can imagine your top 20, your top 10, blimey.
Yeah, I knew you loved this album though. It was no surprise to me.
Yeah, I think it's kind of top 10. It's very close to it, if not. Whereas Mr. Hood, I think if it were up against the second KMD album, that would be a bit of a trickier one, because that is a better album, and I really, really like that. But Yeah, Mr. Hood has just got too much. It's got too much filler on it for me. Like, they are nowhere near on Dell's level lyrically. The music's not as good. It's just quite an easy win for Dell for me.
Okay, so, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious what I'm going to go for. You've got one of my top 10 albums of all time versus what is a good album, just not one that I was ever attached to at the time, and just had no hope of beating Dell. So yeah, I'm voting for Dell. A really great point you make about it being an album that you would give to somebody to introduce them to hip hop. It's kind of like really like great
how
example.
Could you not, how could you not like it?
Because it's as you say, it's fun.
If you like funky music, like how it's so. Like you could, like anyone could dance to this.
Yeah, but it's infectious as well.
And to most of the tracks you could put on at a party, and like people would instantly want to dance to them. Yeah,
definitely. So there we go. So that's the winner. Del the Funkee Homosapien, the first album through to the semi-finals.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
World Cup.
Sing your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
World Cup.
Sing your sound.
World Cup.
Right, so let's go back over to the virtual studio with Steve and his holographic 2-pack, who's holding the bag open. Let's see what comes out next. Give it a good shake. 2-pack, give it a good shake.
He's also holding a gun. Is that okay? Yeah.
As long as it's a hologram, we're all right. Can you just make sure he gives that bag a good shake? That robotic arm looks a bit static.
Yeah. No, it's done. It's good. Okay.
Thanks.
And the next album is out. It's Ice Cube.
Ice
Cube's Death Certificate. And following out is Black Sheep, a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Okay. Right, so who's up first on this one? We've got you, Larry. You're up first on this one. What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing is probably an album that I thought I liked a bit more before going through the process today. It's probably a bit overlong, I think, and doesn't really have the quality to justify that length. I think it's about 23 tracks or something ridiculous like that. I do like the songs that I like are brilliant. I really like Strobe Like Honey. That's kind of an all-time favourite of mine. Whom It May Concern is really funky. Similac Child, Try Counting Sheep, I've always liked. That's probably the first track I was ever aware of from this, like from the old Pete Tong show there. Flavour of the Month as well. But I sort of do get a bit bored by the second half of the album, probably from the sort of Gimme the Finger onwards. Just kind of feel like I've heard it all by that point. I think they're not the best rappers, really, like especially when you compare them to some of the other ones that are in contention this year. Not bad by any means, but yeah, not on sort of Tribes level, for example. And a lot of the beats kind of in the second half especially are either quite forgettable or just outright dull. It has like one of the best first tracks of any rap album ever, I think. Like with that dream sequence in You Mean I'm Not. I really love just like it's such a good pastiche of like a Public Enemy, like a Bomb Squad production or something like that. And if you didn't kind of know if that was the first you'd ever heard of that album, just putting the needle on the groove that day and hearing that, and then sort of hearing the punchline, I think you'd be in for a bit, you know. It kind of paints a picture and then sort of completely pulls the rug. So I do like that. Moving on to sort of Death Certificate, this is like an all-time favourite of mine. It's in my top 3. Not quite sure where it sort of sits in that top 3. So yeah, I think this album it's a perfect match of beats and raps. It all kind of hangs together really, really well. But that being said, I have kind of found it quite tricky to sort of describe this album and why I like it. I think like the beats are some of my the music is some of my favourite kind of music of all time, but I can't really say why in the way that I can for like Apple to Wagon or Low End Theory. I think it just sort of comes down to the sample selection being so good. I think like weirdly, like the actual drum programming is quite sort of unremarkable. in a weird way on this. Like, I never thought I would have said this about this album, but they sort of work well in service of the samples, but I don't know, it kind of feels like you could swap them out for other drums and it wouldn't make much of a difference, which, like, you really couldn't say that for, like, Low End Theory, for example. Thinking about why I like the album, I think lyrically, what's good about it is that every song is thematically really different. Like, he doesn't go on about the same, like, things all the time.
Yeah.
You've got, like, you know, My Summer Vacation is a really good story. You've got Look Who's Burning, which is obviously quite an amusing look at sort of, you know, sexual health and, you know, condoms and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, you know, My Summer Vacation is a really good story. Look Who's Burning has a kind of specific message in there. Bird in the Hand is a really kind of vivid account of, you know, what it's like to come from somewhere like Compton and how you can struggle to kind of get out of that situation without turning to crime. Alive on Arrival is kind of all about racial inequality and sort of healthcare and the judicial system. So there's just so many kind of interesting, like, engaging themes in it, and it sort of really holds your interest because of that. I think he's not just sort of repeating himself throughout the whole thing. And yeah, I noticed that more and more the more I kind of listened and thought about it. Really, it hadn't sort of particularly occurred to me before, but I think that's what makes it such a consistently good album. And yeah, it's his best work. And yeah, just love it. It's a great album, like I've said, and all a top 3. Just not quite sure where it stands in that ranking, really, but hopefully we can resolve where it stands in comparison to one of the others tonight.
I think you're both going to know what I'm going to say about Ice Cube, because I pretty much say every time there's an Ice Cube album, is it just doesn't resonate with me, and I definitely appreciate it as one of his better albums, and it's kind of like hard and angry as it normally kind of is, and I think it's good. But Larry, I think you kind of said this. It's like, it is kind of like slightly unremarkable. I think there's nothing that really kind of stands out about it, and I think it is better than his other albums because the content is, I don't know, brighter, more interesting. But I just can't get into Ice Cube. I do think the beats are okay, but they're just not remarkable enough for me. And Larry, I always know that you two are going to like these albums. They're always going to be in your kind of top 3s, top 10, but they never would be for me. I just can't really put my finger on it. I really don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's I just don't like Ice Cube's cadence. I like him, but I just can't get into it. So the Black Sheep album, I do really like, and I think, Danny, you either gave me this album or you warned me about the first track to kind of say, you know, you've got to listen past the first track because it's not what the album's like, and it is a really crazy good start, and of course it's a they're members of the Native Tongues, but they're kind of like slightly harder than kind of what you'd expect from Native Tongue, and yeah, it's funky. It is a really long album. In fact, I think Death Certificate kind of feels quite long to me as well, maybe because I don't enjoy it, but this is definitely a long album, and I think taking out a few tracks would make it much, much tighter. They Love the Ladies. That's one of the interesting but maybe irritating things, as they kind of keep coming back to their own kind of like prowess in the boxer short department. But there are lots of good tracks in there, and one of them I think is one of my favourite ever tracks. And I really like, I think I said in a previous podcast about how much I like Shook Ones Part 2, because it really gets you in that kind of hip-hop state of mind. Well, I like The Choice Is Yours Revisited. I think I just love putting that on and just listening to it over and over again. Similac Child I really like. And Black With No Vision as well, I think is a really great track. Strobe Like Honey, which you said, Larry, as well. There's good things on there that I really like, but yeah, probably too long to be a classic album. And maybe a bit kind of samey. So, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with Black Sheep. Now, this is not in my top 10. This is not one of my top 10 albums of all time, but I do like it a lot. So I was first introduced to it back. I think they used to play the videos on MTV Raps, and it was, I think they did Try Counting Sheep, Flavour of the Month, and I just fell in love with those singles, like most people. The Choice Is Yours. Loved that one as well. Loved the singles, picked up the album, and it didn't really disappoint when I got it. Like you both said, that first track, You Mean I'm Not, it's very rare in hip hop that I find it funny. Like, I don't really find skits funny. I don't really find hip hop that funny, like laugh out loud funny, but this is one of the only songs that actually makes me laugh properly whenever I hear it, especially at the end when he goes, I thought that I was hard. Yeah, so over the top, brilliant pastiche. So I love that. Such a great opening. But it really sets out the stall for who they are, because I do think everything they do is tongue in cheek. Like Drez is a very cheeky kind of rapper. He's always got his tongue firmly in his cheek. And obviously the Sugar Dick Daddy, Mr. Long, is obviously, he doesn't take himself too seriously. So yeah, I mean, I like it a lot. I mean, there's some really, really great beats on this. They're not the strongest rappers in native tongues, but I do think, the amount of singles and the amount they blew up on this album, I do think that really counts in its favour. But I do agree, it kind of goes on a bit long. Like on the CD that I've got, 22 tracks, a couple of bonus tracks, it kind of drags a bit. And I'm looking through the track list now, and like, even though I listened to it this week, I don't remember how a few of them go still. So it's not, there are a few gaps in my knowledge of this album. I loved it at the time, but it's just the memorable ones stuck in my head, whereas something like Dell, just all the tracks are just instantly recognisable to me. So yeah, I do like this album a lot, but in terms of its matchup and the comparison with Ice Cube, it's David and Goliath for me. Death Certificate is, I've got a long and involved relationship with this album. Steady Mobbing was the first CD single I ever bought when I first got a CD player, and I think it had a version of Us on it as well. And then when I got the album, it was just like a bomb went off. I just love this album. What I love most about it is the intensity and the anger. Like, he's a very angry young man on this album. He got a lot of it out of his system on America's Most, but this one he just seemed to really... He's always angry, but this one he just seemed to step up, and he's angry at everybody. He's angry at Koreans, he's angry at black people themselves, he's angry at people who, get STIs. He's angry at everybody, like Uncle Sam, like America itself. He's just like, he runs the gamut of all the people he's angry at in this one, but he does it with such vitriol, but also such sort of dexterity, lyrical dexterity. And I don't know, a lot of this, a lot of these tracks, just I love them to death. A Bird in the Hand, I think, is a standout for me. Touches on obviously some pretty important issues. And another one that you don't hear many people talking about is Man's Best Friend, which, when you listen to the lyrics of that, is absolute genius. Like some of his storytelling stuff, or some of his concept raps, where he's right, this is the subject I'm going to talk about. I'm going to compare a gun to a dog. It's genius. It really is. And you can see why he was kind of considered the lyrical force behind NWA for so long. Just some of the ideas he comes out with, but it's sort of surrounded by these really angry, issue-driven tracks. And I just think this album, just like the energy in it, just sort of smacked me in the mouth when I heard it. You say about the beats not being memorable, I just do not agree with that in the slightest. Or not memorable, but like nothing about it that stands out. They're good,
but they're just not remarkable enough. They just, I don't know.
They're so funky, hard, intense.
Just as a point of clarity with that, I'm specifically talking about the drum programming. Like, the samples are really, really memorable.
Yeah.
But I know it's a weird thing to talk about, but I just thought the actual drums themselves, when I kind of listened to them today, I was like, yeah, they're quite sort of, they're quite plain, really. They just sort of provide a bit of a bed for the music. But it doesn't, not that it matters, it's still an incredible album.
When you've got...
Just the actual drums themselves
When you've got that much going on, though, like a lot of these tracks are very kind of busy, and there's loads of samples thrown in, and they're skitting from one thing to the next. And I think maybe the beats don't need to be that intricate or complicated.
Well, that's it. I think maybe that's a good production.
Yeah.
decision was made.
They gave it what it needed.
It's just quite simple, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, there's so many highlights in this album, and I could listen to it all the way through and not have to skip any of them. Even the skits, Robin Lynch is a bit annoying, but then obviously it culminates. And the other thing is, like, the first copy of this I had on CD, it had loads of the tracks missing. So Black Career wasn't on there, and No Vaseline wasn't on there. And so, like, I bought a copy of it later with those tracks on. Like, it went even further up in my estimation. I just, like, No Vaseline is one of the most vitriolic diss tracks I've ever heard. But just a brilliant track too, with a Daz Band sample. It's such a great album and such a great way to end the album as well. So for these reasons and more, Ice Cube Death Certificate is in my top 10. I think it might even be in my top 3, like you, Larry. And I like it. There's no contest with this one for me. Absolutely no contest. And so, which is the reason why I'm going to give my vote straight out and just say Ice Cube Death Certificate 1-0. What are you two saying?
Steve?
Well, it's got to be Black Sheep. Sorry, guys.
And you, Larry, you've got the casting vote?
Yeah, I've given the game away already by saying it's top 3. I think actually, Danny, our top 3 are the same.
I think they are.
We probably don't know what order they're in, but we can kind of, that will become clear as we go on. But Death Certificate all day long for me. It's incredible.
Absolutely right. Well, that's a 2-1 victory for Death Certificate then, and that's the second album through to the semi-finals. So it's back over to you, Steve, in the virtual green screen studio with your virtual 2-pack. Let's see what's next out of the bag.
Okay. He's asked me to ask you, Dan, if you liked his diss track, hit him up.
Does he have the capability of actually understanding my response?
I can type it in using binary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. I think he went a bit over the top with it. I think he got a bit too excited on it. But yeah, it is one of the all-time classic. I mean, musically, it's not very good. Just a replay, don't look any further beat. But yeah, essentially, it's a good diss track. Yeah, you can just. So, do you want to type that in?
I agree.
He's throwing you a gang sign, so I think that means he's happy.
Okay, cool. That's good. All right.
Right. And he's drawn the next album out of the hat. It's the Low End Theory, Tribe Called Quest.
Oh dear. Okay.
One of the big
What's
guns.
it facing?
And out of the hat, it's NWA.
Oh my goodness. This is exactly the match I did not want to see in round 1.
This should be the final.
This should be the final. Well, let's not give the game away, but this was a potential final.
Oh.
You'd expect them in the semis, wouldn't you, at the very least?
You certainly would. Right, okay, this is going to be really tricky. What's happened here is you've drawn 2 of my favourite albums of all time. They're 2 top 5 albums for me. And in NWA, you have actually my favourite hip-hop album of all time. And that's not just me saying that. That's Redman as well, because that's his favourite hip-hop album of all time. I heard on a recent interview. The main thing about this album is no other album makes me feel the way I do when I listen to it. Okay, it's got this kind of energy and this anger and this intensity behind it. Like, it's exciting, it's incendiary, it's really entertaining. Like, you could just feel like they wanted to just show off. They didn't have Ice Cube, so I think they wanted to prove that they could knock out a really, really good album without him, and I think they really do deliver. In fact, I think this is so much better than Straight Outta Compton. I mean, I think Straight Outta Compton is one of the most overrated hip hop albums of all time. It's got like 4 good tracks on it. Whereas this one, it was just an explosion, an absolute explosion. I mean, you had all the controversy surrounding it. And don't get me wrong, it's a problematic album. It's certainly not one of the most lyrically complex albums that's ever been made. But there's just something about it. When you're listening to it, it just has this effect on me. It's like you can hear everything they're trying to do. It's angry. It's really like impactful. So the reasons why I like it so much, Dre's production, obviously, you know, the bottom line, this is such a quality production from Dre. It's hard, it's soulful, it's funky, it's a lot of replay, George Clinton, Parliament, Funkadelic samples. It's so good. And it just kind of, certainly with Always Into Something, it laid the template for the G-Funk sound, I think, with that high-pitched synth. I think that was kind of the first time I'd ever heard that sort of thing being done.
Yeah.
And that sort of rim shot-led beat. So, you know, I love that. I had that on 12-inch. Dre and Yella's production just makes this stand out. And you could hear what he was laying the groundwork for the Chronic in this album. You could hear a lot of it sort of, it developed, but you could hear a lot of what he tried to do in the Chronic starting here. People talk about, you know, Dre as a producer. As a rapper on here, this is him at his absolute best for me. His verses, certainly on the title track, they blow me away every single time I hear them. And he might not have wrote them, you know, who cares? He delivers them so well. And he's got such swagger on them. And the lyrical kind of, the rhyme schemes are just, they're really, really good. And like, to me, he is one of the best rappers certainly in NWA, but you know, he's so much better than people sort of have him down for. Yeah. But as well as that, Ren and Easy are on the top of their game as well. And the way the three of them interact on the tracks, they go from one to the next. Their interplay is brilliant. And sometimes, you know, you've had Dre and Ren going for a bit, and then Easy comes in with his verse, and it's like, could this have got any better? It's like it's just, there's something about the alchemy of this album that just works so much. It's breathtaking, and then just finally, it's got what I genuinely believe is my favourite hip hop song on it of all time, and that's Real Ends, which was also on the 100 Miles and Running album, the EP. Sorry, it's my favourite hip hop song of all time. I think the word I would use to describe it the most is relentless. It just, when it starts, it rolls right the way through to the end. They take turns on the verses. Just when you think it's over, somebody else will come in with another verse. The chorus has got scratching. It's got Yella doing this. Oh, it's just such a great track. So yeah, for me, I mean, it's my favourite album of all time. So I don't really know what more I can say about it than that.
Danny, I think you just absolutely nailed it. I think I could just hear the Wembley crowds are just applauding your analysis there. That was they're on their feet. I can see them.
They
are on their feet. That was spot on.
Yeah, which makes it all the more hard for me to have to compare it with another one of my top 10 albums, The Low End Theory, which, you know, had it been against anybody else, I think it would have just sailed through, because it's just a phenomenal album. I think it's as close to a perfect album as you can get. I think, like on NWA, even though it's my favourite album, I do recognise that there's some stuff on it is absolute rubbish, and I would not have put on it in a million years. Like I'd rather F You, Automobile. I think they really spoil the album. Yes, F a bit funny, but whereas Low End is start to finish an absolute stone cold classic. The interplay between Tip and Fife is brilliant. I mean, Fife comes to the forefront on this album in a way that he wasn't on their first album. Every single track is iconic, and every single lyric is iconic. As you're listening to it, there are lines that you just know, like you know it. It's like a rite of passage for any hip hop fan to know these lyrics or bits of them. Even people who aren't into hip hop know bits of these lyrics. It's such an iconic album. It's my favourite of their albums. I think what I love about it so much is the heavy jazz influence on it. We've Got the Jazz is probably my favourite track on the album because it's so smooth. It's got one of my favourite breaks. And it ends with Scenario, which is the greatest posse cut of all time. Every line in that is memorable. So, you know, this is a heavyweight clash of the highest order. 2 of my top 10 is going head to head. And I think I better shut up now and let you two talk about them, because I could go on forever. So let's go with you, Steve, on this one.
There's not much left to say. Blimey, that was incredibly well said. Well, yeah. So NWA, I completely agree with everything you say. So I think I just have to validate maybe a couple of things. This is definitely their best album, and Dr. Dre is on top form here. It's really interesting what you were saying. Like this album is obviously inspired by Ice Cube, and actually, when I listen to it, I think, I want if Ice Cube was on it, could it get any better? But actually, we wouldn't have it as good as would we if he had been on there. It'd have been a different sounding album, different type of album.
I think so.
MC Ren, who's not the strongest rapper, is actually really quite good on this album.
He's immense. I mean, I think he really holds it together in a way. He's like he comes in on the intro and he sets the scene.
He steps up.
Yeah, he steps up and he sets the scene for it. And all the way through, he's his constant kind of solid presence.
See, to me, MC Ren was always the one that people were impressed with, like in the old days.
Yeah, no, I agree.
He was the one that I kind of like. He was my quintessential like rapper.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? He could rap fast and he just sounded really authoritative and yeah, in a way that I kind of didn't. He was my favourite.
But I think he stepped it up in this album. I think he stepped it up even more. He became the main guy, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And although there's some annoying tracks that you said on here, Danny, I don't think any of them are really kind of like filler. You don't have to skip them. They're not like awful. Well, I always
skip Automobile.
I like of those two tracks, Automobile's the best one because it is quite funny.
Yeah, it's not that bad. I really like Real N-Words Don't Die. The drum hits so hard on there. It's just amazing. And like whenever I do a compilation album, Appetite for Destruction, Find a Method and Flee always get on there. Approach to Danger and Days and Way Back. It's just something a little bit different at the end. So this is, phenomenal album. Definitely, the best NWO album. But then it's going against what I would consider a masterpiece in the Low End Theory. It is just funky. It's complex, and Fife really steps up. And I don't know if there's an album that just starts as well as this one. There's like the first, probably 6, maybe all the tracks in it. The first 6 tracks just keep going on and on into each other so well. I love Butter. I think that's probably my favorite track on there. I think Fife is really, really in his prime.
Oh, he knocks it out of the park on that one.
He flows through that so nice. And there's the classic, obviously, there's Check the Rhyme. And yeah, Danny agrees. Scenario, I think, is the greatest posse cut ever. It's just perfect. And I think probably the same as, the choice is yours. I could put Scenario on to get me into that kind of hip hop state of mind. So 2 absolutely cracking albums. Absolutely amazing.
Absolute monsters.
2 monsters.
I'm really, really fascinated to hear what you've got to say about this, Larry. Let's have it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely gutted that these two have come up against each other, to be honest, like knowing that one of them's got to go. Like I've always known that I've loved the NWA album, but I don't think I realised quite how much I loved Low End Theory until kind of this week, really. I think, like, starting with Low End Theory, like, to me, it's just the pinnacle of that early 90s, like, jazzy sound that other kind of groups like Gangster and, Pete Rock and CL Smooth were also going for. Like, this one just does it in such a kind of polished, classy way, which is just sort of head and shoulders above the competition, really. It's like a really cohesive, slick sound. You've got so many, like, infectious, catchy bass lines on there. You've got the silky smooth, like, jazzy loops. And like the drums in particular are just so distinctive on this album. Like the snares are really kind of crisp and snappy, and the hi-hats are really there's a clarity in the hi-hats and they drive the kind of songs through.
Yeah, they just always sound so meant to be, don't they? They sound so
totally
intrinsically...
Like when I kind of mentioned about like on Death Certificate, the drums being a bit inconsequential, like the drums are front and center on this and you could not replace them. Like Q-Tip is such a monster of a producer. Like we've said this before when we kind of talked about People's Instinctive Travels, like he's so underrated.
He is, he's so underrated.
Yeah, as a producer.
He's just rock solid. He's also an incredible rapper as well.
Yeah.
But I think, the music's quite straightforward on this. It tends to kind of be just made up of relatively simple, like loops rather than, piecing together multiple sources, kind of like the Bomb Squad or Boogeymen do. But what that means is like there's kind of loads of space in the mix. And the lyrics just fit on top of that like so nicely, really kind of allows them to breathe and shine. I think, you know, the vocals are easily like the beats on this. Like you said, it's kind of famous for the album where like Fife steps out of the shadows, and even like the first thing you hear from Fife is when he says, yo.
Yeah. The way he comes in, it's such a strong...
It's like him stepping up to kind of prove himself.
Yeah.
There's quotable lines all over the place, like great choruses, great hooks here and there. It's just such a listenable, kind of nice, fun album to listen to. I just absolutely love it.
The sequencing is great as well, isn't it? It's like it just one track goes into the next so smoothly and seamlessly. But and also they don't let them play for too long. They're quite short. They'll cut a track and they'll go into the next one. It's like you said it, Steve. It's a masterpiece, I reckon.
And quite a good example of that actually is like the weakest track on the album is What.
Yeah.
Right at the end, but the saving grace about that is that the very last word where they all shout "What."
Yeah.
Then leads into scenario so perfectly that it makes that crap track like worth being on there. Like it just adds something. So I love that little transition.
It's only 2.5 minutes long as well, so you kind of like, but it stops before you realise you're not enjoying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of It's quite sort of short and sweet album, but it's just so good. Like the NWA album just kind of couldn't be more different sonically. It's like the polar opposite really of Low End, to the point where you can barely believe like they're both in the same genre really. It just kind of goes to show how much variation there can be in hip hop. It's not kind of the same like a lot of people think. Like Danny, I've kind of been obsessed with the album for, you know, over 20 years now basically, and especially as a scholar of like music production, this is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. It's the best thing that Dre ever produced, like without a doubt, and that's really saying something with his catalogue. And I don't understand why it's not a more commonly held view that this album isn't his best work. It barely gets a mention by most people.
Yeah.
Like you said, Danny, Straight Outta Compton I do like Straight Outta Compton. It's the thing that got me into hip hop in the first place. And I do love the good tracks on there, but it is overrated. This is just so much more than that album. It's just what I love. It's hard, like, and menacing. There's just so much like tension and drama in the music. I think just like thinking about that first track, you've got that kind of really mean, like descending, like guitar riff, which is just so kind of heavy metally and hard. It's like the production is just exquisite. It's kind of like slow motion Bomb Squad production. Like it's that densely layered. Like to kind of listen to it casually, you might think that they're loops, but there's actually so many little layers going on in there that kind of reward critical listening if you're kind of into that kind of stuff. And like it's like I've written here, it's like widescreen, high definition music. Like he feels like, again, as a scholar of production, he fills up like the frequency range. Like from, you got the really deep kind of heavy bottom end, and then like at the top you've got like those famous Dre like sustained string notes that kind of just will lead like all the way through, and just every part of the frequency spectrum is used up perfectly. It's also really wide. You've got lots of little kind of bits panning kind of hard right and left and sort of everywhere in between. Such an exciting thing to listen to, like on headphones.
And he cuts in loads of, I don't know if it's yellow or whatever, but they cut in little sample snippets in the background and stuff. And
little voices.
Little voices,
that's brilliant. And then lyrically as well, I mean, you've touched on this already, but like the common view is that Ice Cube leaving like hurt NWA as a group, and I think that's why a lot of people discount this album. But for me, like as Steve kind of said, really, like it would be a different album without Ice Cube. Like I think them breaking up is the best thing that ever happened, like for all of them. Like Ice Cube went on to produce like Death Certificate, which is incredible. and it allowed NWA to do this album in this particular way, which is also incredible. And yeah, I just think the remaining rappers, as you said, just fit together so well. That kind of, I think one of the most consistently wrong opinions in hip hop is that Dr. Dre isn't a good rapper. Like, if you think that, I can't identify with you as a hip hop fan. Like, he's incredible. And he doesn't write his own lyrics, but his flow is as good as any other West Coast rapper, I think. And his voice is just incredible. Got a kind of fantastic, like, instantly recognizable voice. MC Ren, as we said, is brilliant. I love Eazy-E as well. He's such a charismatic. He's not a good rapper, but he makes up with it by having so much charisma, and he gets all the funny lines.
And you remember all of his verses. It's like he comes in, you know exactly when he's coming in, and you know what he's going to say, and you can rap along with all of his verses. Certainly,
not just on this album, but on everything that Eazy's involved with. He's one of my favourites. I've always loved Eazy-E, even though kind of, like, technically speaking, he can't rap, and they have to make him record his lines individually and piece them all together because he couldn't do it all at once. I think, as kind of Danny alluded to as well, I think you do have to mention that, like, one thing that does get me about this album, the older I get, is that it is horribly misogynistic. And even though kind of, like, casual sexism was just always rife in hip hop, especially back in these days, there's some genuinely kind of nasty stuff in this when you really think about it.
Yeah, they went overboard, didn't they? I think with the misogyny.
Especially knowing that Dre has, like, a history of violence against women. Like, it's like they actually mean what they're saying rather than saying. I always kind of, when I was younger, passed it off as being a bit sort of funny. And some of it kind of, although the subject matter is horrible, like they kind of do make some humour out of it. But actually, it makes me wince a bit to listen to it now. And I haven't actually listened to this in quite a while because of it. I just can't really. It can be a tough listen.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those. I listen to it, and it's a while before I listen to it again because I need to have that space. I would pay so much money for an instrumental version of this album. Not just because of that. I can kind of handle it and just take it for what it is as a kind of product of its time and separating the artist from the art and all of that. But I would love an instrumental copy just to really kind of study the music here because it's just incredible. I think it's up there with, we mentioned, like, last time, DJ Quick being such a good musical album. This one isn't as musical in the same way as Quick is, but the production detail is on that same level. It's the only thing that kind of matches it, really. Absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah, mind-blowing. And it just blows my mind also how criminally underrated it is. I just don't understand why. It's always like frowned upon. It's looked down upon because of the controversy, because of the dodgy lyrics and the problematic stuff they talk about, yes. But people, like, don't... They let that cloud their vision on it, but then they don't see the amazing sort of lyrics and the rapping and the production because of the controversy that surrounded it at the time. And I think that's a real tragedy. But yeah, like I say, like, we are obsessed by this album, and I don't know. I think to me, it's got a kind of a mythic quality about it. I don't know if you kind of agree with that. It's kind of not just the album itself, but the story surrounding it is a kind of a mythic quality, helped along by the cover, definitely. The cover as well, which we need to mention. But the cover is just one of my favourite hip hop covers of all time. Is everything about this album is just phenomenal. Anyway, I think we better move on and vote on this one, boys. So let's come back to you.
I will say, just before we move on very quickly, it's a shame that this one didn't come up against Death Certificate in one way, because I once had a Facebook conversation with J-Zone, and I asked him about his opinion on this album. He said he loved it, but he says he prefers Death Certificate. So he could have had the casting vote if it were needed. We
should try and get him on. Try and get him on the show. Yeah. Cool. Right. Okay. So I think I'm up first to vote on this one, and it's a really, really hard choice, and I wish it wasn't between these two albums, but I think, I need to stay true to my real rank system, which has NWA's FL4 zagging right at the top. So yeah, that gets my vote, NWA. Steve, what are you voting for?
I still really don't know which way I'm going to go here. What you two were just kind of discussing about, this album came out at a time when NWA were the most controversial group, ever. And they probably still are the most controversial group ever.
Most dangerous, definitely, yeah.
And so, yeah, it does have a context to those, the aggressive, sweary, disagreeable the content of the album. It just sounds so good. But then, on the other hand, Low End Theory is a masterpiece, and Q-Tip is a genius. Right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for E-Full for Zagging.
Who are you going for that?
Yeah,
it surprised me.
Because at the end of the day, I have to go by what I normally do. Is I look at how many great tracks are on there. I think it's got more great tracks, and Dr. Dre is the boss.
Interesting. Fair enough. Okay, so that's 2-0 to NWA. So Larry, let's see where you go with it.
It's kind of academic, really, but I'm really surprised at how hard this is for me to I'll just say I am voting for FL for Zagging because it is still in my top 3 of all time, and production wise it is the best album ever. And just as a kind of scholar of production, I could, if I had to choose between these 2 albums to never listen to, only have access to one of them again, it would be NWA, just to kind of drink in that and absorb that kind of production masterclass. But it absolutely guts me to kind of have to kick out Low End Theory, because it's actually, if I had to pick an album to listen to right now or next week, it'd probably be Low End Theory. Yeah. NWA, like you said, Danny, it's a very absorbing listen, but it can be quite a hard one as well.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
You can't come back to it regularly. No. Whereas with Low End, you can throw that on any old time and have a really nice time listening.
But when you do go back to NWA for that first time, the first time you put it back on after not having heard it for a while, every single time, it makes the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. Well, if you'd have said to me that Low End Theory was going out in the first round 3-0, I wouldn't have believed you.
Absolute
but
madness,
it came up against one that we've just got this attachment to. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. That's the World Cup.
That's the World Cup for you. So so that's your third team through to the semi-finals. NWA's second album. Right, so we come to the final match in round 1. So it's just a formality, but we need to get to our virtual 2-pack to draw the balls out. So what have we got left, Steve? Over to you.
Right, so out of the hat, it's OG, Original Gangster, Ice-T, versus De La Soul.
Another East v West.
Another East versus
That's a
West.
Clean sweep. Unbelievable. Okay.
What are the chances?
Well, is it 1 in 8? Okay, that's probably not right either. But so Steve, you're up first on this one. Let's have your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think probably of all the albums in this World Cup, these are the 2 albums that I am definitely less familiar with, and I just kind of. In summary, De La Soul is Dead is an album that I just never really got into. I listened to it a few times, I just didn't kind of appreciate it, I think. And then Ice-T's album, I've only listened to for this World Cup, and I think I messaged you both to say, actually, are you both going to vote for this? Because it's actually really good. And it is surprisingly good. So I'll talk a bit more about that one first. And I think it kind of feels like it's like that classic early 90s production. It's just like solidly solidly well produced, like nothing fancy or nothing like overly funky or, it's certainly not, a masterpiece, but it's just good, solid production. And actually Ice-T, I think, is a really good rapper. And I think maybe because he was like on MTV Raps as like the host and stuff, I probably like discounted him as being like any good. I just thought he was like some sort of mainstream, I don't know, what's it. But this is like his 4th album. And although it's like quite a long album, I always say I like an album that kind of plays well as a long player. And I love listening to this all the way through. And although Low End Theory is great, Larry, you said you'd like this that next week. I think this would be the album that I would listen to next week because it's really kind of like caught my attention. So many great tracks on it, like My Contract, My Nova Matter, OG, Midnight, even though it's like a little bit kind of rockier as a track, it's really good. And I really, really, really like Pulse of the Rhyme. Yeah. I think he raps so hard on that. It really comes off really, really well. That's definitely been like I'm really pleased I found that track.
And a great little sample on it as well.
This World Cup. So
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I do love it. So I think that's a really good album. And then the De La Soul is Dead album. I really like Principle, and I think it is a good album, but I try to like think why this doesn't kind of like, I don't know, resonate with me a bit more. And it obviously sounds completely different from 3 Feet High and Rising, and it definitely grows on me. And they were obviously looking for a different sound, but I kind of think they should just stuck with that 3 Feet sound. It's just hard work. And I like albums that make you listen over and over again to try and get into them, and then you kind of grow to appreciate them. But it just doesn't, there's just like the skits and those kind of like, I don't know, they're part skit, part song. They just don't work for me. I think they should just stick to what they do best. And the tracks that I do like, but I don't love them. And I think there's probably only a couple of tracks on there that are kind of okay. Like a roller skating jam thing, Saturdays, I think that's just because it's feel good, isn't it? It's funky, feel good. And I like the Fanatic of the B Word. That's got Black Sheep on, which maybe why I like it. So I think a good but underwhelming album.
Okay, yep. That's some valid points there, Steve. Larry, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an uncharacteristically brief round for me, I think. To be honest, I'll start with Ice-T. I've never been a huge fan of him. Outside of some standout tracks, very few of which are on this album. I definitely like The Iceberg a lot more. That's my album of his that I like. This is kind of not really relevant, to be honest, but it's just my personal opinion. I always kind of associate him with like people we knew at school who only liked rap music when it was trendy to be into rap music. And they liked Ice-T because he was like the hard kind of rapper who rapped about guns and stuff like that. I always associate that it's just like these sort of cartoonishly violent raps. And I just don't really rate him as a rapper at all. He's got quite a good voice, but don't like his style. Got a weird, he doesn't project very well. He kind of almost just talks the lyrics or sort of murmurs them out, really. Apart from on some, not every track, but I think like the title track here has a pretty memorable beat. But I mainly know that piece of music because it was used for the radio version of Fist of Fun, the Lee and Herring show. I don't know if you were kind of aware of that, but that's where I knew that from. So just not an album I kind of have any desire to listen to again, really. I don't have any. I sort of have a memory of it coming out and listening to it with you, Danny. I think that I just never had it. Don't really like it. Yeah. Moving on to De La Soul is Dead. Again, never been the biggest fan of them particularly, and if anything, I kind of prefer their later stuff like Stakes is High, The Grind Day, and some of the artificial intelligence stuff. I didn't have this album at the time. I don't have it in my collection now. Don't have any attachment to it whatsoever. And so just listening to it kind of completely free of any personal bias, there's just nothing in there that interests me, really. The beats I find really dull for the most part, just too sparse. On the whole, I think they're good MCs, but they just don't shine on this album at all. I much prefer the first album. I can see why people were disappointed in this after 3 Feet High and Rising. And yeah, I of all the albums we're looking at this week, I can just see myself never wanting to listen to this one again, really. I think the only track that stands out is Roller Skating Jam. But that's mainly because of like the intro, like that Soul sample that's only there for like 10 seconds at the beginning. Yeah, just gutted that these two albums kind of against each other in the first round, really. Because I'd like to see them both like taking an early bath, really.
yeah. It's an odd kind of matchup, isn't it? To have these both in here. Obviously, people voted for them to get them in. I don't really understand why they're in. It's probably my fault. But yeah, I have to say, after sort of listening to me again for this, I do kind of hear what you're saying, and I kind of agree with a lot of it. What's happened here, I think, is that I've got a memory of these albums and having them on cassette back in 91 and loving them and just listening to them obsessively, just really liking them, and then kind of just assuming that that's how I still felt about them. And then, you know, you listen to them more and more, and you kind of hear the tracks you like, and you still assume they're good. And I actually sat down and listened to them critically this week, and they're not as good as I thought they were. They honestly aren't. I think De La Soul Is Dead suffers from the same thing that 3 Feet High and Rising suffers from, is that there are too many skits. It's too fragmented, too bitty. Yeah. It's too hard work to get to the good stuff. It's like a mango, you know, you have to peel it and get the stone out. But once you get there, there's some really good sweet stuff. But it's just too much like hard work to get to it. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I was like, they kept coming up with skits, like what's the one where they do the house song, Kicked Out of the House? It's like, yeah, all right, funny, all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't help the flow of the album. It just keeps stopping. But on the flip side, the strong songs on here really do kind of lift it, and I think that's what's made it stick in my head for all this time as an album that I love. For instance, yeah, Saturdays is the classic track on here. The Ring Ring Ring, obviously another single of theirs, massive single, which is just so infectious and such a great sample. The What Not sample just absolutely elevates that track. Absolutely love it. And probably one of the best songs on it is Millie Pulled a Pistol on Santa, which tells a really, really good story. And I always loved that one. It was just so different, and to talk about sort of like child abuse and such a dark subject. I hadn't heard anything like that from De La Soul at the time, and I was really impressed by it. Oodles of O's I love as well. I think that's a really cool intro to the album. Love the beat. I love that sort of bass sample. But yeah, just listen to it. And I think the other thing was, when I first had it, I had a cassette, and a lot of the tracks were missing off that, because obviously they've got to edit it down to a certain length for the cassette. And so I've since bought it on CD, and there's all these skits and all these extra tracks that they cut from the cassette. And I'm like, do you know what? They were cut for a reason. I mean, they're awful. And they Kicked Out the House was one of them.
They are awful.
Yeah. So I think I've just been tricked by the format. I think because I had it on cassette, I think I was like much like a Master Ace. I was led down a certain way with this album.
But that's like my Master Ace.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I was kind of. I thought that was the album, and then I've since realised that it's actually overblown, bloated, punctuated by these moments of amazing music that sort of could quite happily be compacted down into an EP, maybe. But moving on to Ice-T, I think...
Danny, before you move on, what do you actually both think about the kind of skit in general in hip-hop? Because obviously De La Soul are credited with introducing the skit and making it kind of famous, and does think it adds anything, really?
I like a good one. Like, I really like the Mr. Hood ones, like I said earlier. I like the NWA ones. They're always really well done. I like Wu-Tang ones generally. Like maybe not generally, but I love the Liquid Swords ones. Yeah, but De La Soul are just the worst for it. I think they're just not. They're not good kind of skits.
They feel like a joke you're not in on often.
Yeah,
and that's what I don't like about them.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Actually, I think just
the original and worst.
Just moving away from the skits thing, like considering that they're from the same camp, like to put this up against like Low End Theory is just laughable. Yeah. Like the difference in quality between the two of them, like it's just absolutely no match. I know not comparing them, but just as a point of reference, like this is just a weak album compared to that.
But De La Soul instead is lauded as their best album and one of the best albums from this year, and I completely agree with you. It isn't.
Yeah, well,
I just don't understand.
It's certainly fine. It's certainly my favourite album.
If I'd had it at the time, but
yeah, it's my favourite of their albums, and I always had just assumed that was set in stone. This is my De La album, and I loved it. I just I don't know. Just maybe it's just me and my taste now, and me having less patience for skits or whatever. I just don't like it as much, but there you go. Look, we better move it on. So I'm going to talk about Ice-T. So coming on to Ice-T, I think again what's happened here is that I've got a historical attachment to this album. Listened to it again this week, and the first few tracks I was like, oh my god, what have I done? Like, because a lot of the tracks they've got those kind of drum machine beats. You know, you can hear it. It sounds quite cheap. Certainly like Ziploc. When Ziploc comes in, I'm like, oh, okay. I loved this back in the day, but now this sounds a bit ropey. But then it picks up, and you come into like Mind Over Matter, and then New Jack Hustler comes in. Now, New Jack Hustler is an absolutely immense song. I used to love that. It's got Bobby Humphrey sample on it. A really good track. Yeah, I love it. It's just a stone cold classic.
That's what I mean by that kind of classic production. It's that kind of era that you expect that kind of production, and for what it is, it's well done. I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes something can sound like from this era. Can sound really, really dated because they've used drum machines and they've used those sort of bass sounds, and it sounds like it was made in 1991. Others are more timeless because they've used breaks and they've used those classic samples, and the drums don't age because they're just break beats. And I think there's a mixture of them on this album. I think New Jack Hustler is certainly one that stands the test of time, as is OG Original Gangster. It uses the synthetic substitution break, and you can't go wrong when you use that. On a hip hop track.
It uses it well.
Exactly. And OG Original Gangster is one of my favourite tracks from this year, and I love that so much. But then it kind of picks up. There's loads of really good stuff comes on after that. We've got Ed, I think is a really good track. I think and also Bitches 2 is good because they're two very good story raps. Ice-T's really good at telling story raps. Certainly, from On the Iceberg, the title track On the Iceberg, he tells the stories there. Yeah. Like those stories just stick in your head. And like Ed and Bitches 2 are two really good ones. Standouts, as I say, OG, New Jack Hustler. Flyby is kind of like one of those really old school sounding tracks, like with a really kind of generic beat that just sounds like it was made in 1991. But then, something like Fried Chicken, it's one of those, the lyrics for Fried Chicken are one of those I recite in my head sometimes. I just have it in my head sometimes. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, this album. It's got some real good highs, but some real low lows for me. And I'm not sure how it got in over some of the ones that were in our honourable mentions section, which we'll talk about later. So all in all, not a particularly great matchup, to be honest with you. And I actually, to the point where I find it hard to know what I'm going to vote for. So I'm going to defer, and I'm going to go over back to Steve so you can vote first, because I need to have a little bit of a think and a cry.
Yeah, easy one for me, Original Gangster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with the Tru-Skore system here. Both of them rank, less than 3 on the scale, but the one that comes out on top is Ice-T. De La Soul is the lowest ranked album of the week. Okay.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I think I'm going to go for Ice-T as well. I think I surprised myself with that because I always thought that De La Soul was one of my favourite albums from this year, but I think having listened to it again, it just kind of annoyed me more than anything. So yeah, I'm going to go for Ice-T as well. So that's a 3-0 Clean sweep for Ice-T. Well done, Tracy. Ice Tracy.
Tracy Marrow.
Ice Tracy Marrow.
So, yeah.
So there we go. That's our semi-final lineup complete. We've got Ice-T's OG Original Gangster, unbelievably. We have NWA's Afro Zaggin, Ice Cube's Death Certificate, and Del the Funkee Homosapiens. I wish my brother George was here. Join us in a bit.
Semi-final.
World Cup.
Semi-final.
World Cup. Who's that going to be? World Cup.
Semi-final.
World Cup. World Cup.
Okay, you join us here pitch side. We're about to have the draw for the semi-finals of the Hip Hop World Cup 1991. It's been an absolutely phenomenal contest so far. Some massive albums going out, huge shocks. So we're still kind of reeling from them, to be honest with you. Emotions running high. Fellas, what we thinking?
So just to be completely clear, we're pitch side, ready for the next match to begin, and yet the draw to decide which teams are playing is yet to take.
No. The draw is being made pitch side.
Right. So the teams are all in the changing rooms, getting ready to.
And then when they know, they come out.
They'll come out.
Yeah.
The teams are wrapped.
Yeah, and they're all played at the same stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, over to you, Steve, and your virtual 2-pack for match 1 in the semi-finals.
Well, it's absolute drama over here, Danny. You're not going to believe this, but something incredible has happened. 2-pack has been gunned down.
Wow.
Hologram of 2-pack has been gunned down.
With virtual bullets.
With virtual bullets.
Virtual Biggie Smalls.
I think it may be a kind of West Coast thing because as we know, it's all West Coast albums in the semi-finals. So,
well, that's absolutely tragic. Luckily, though, it looks like you've got somebody there with you to replace. Is that Ian Wright? I can see next to you there. Ex-Arsenal striker.
Right, but because this is a hologram machine, I can load up other dead rappers. So if I've got a kind of a few different discs here that I can kind of slot in this. I've got Guru, Nate Dogg, Big Pun, Jay Dilla, or Big Bang Hank.
Oh, let's go for Big Bang Hank.
Big Hank, definitely. Could you just let Ian Wright's just behind you though? You might just sort of let him know when he's not needed.
I don't think I can. He might shout at me.
Okay.
He will want his fee. If I know Ian Wright.
Yeah.
Like I think I do.
Classic righty. Well, we'll sort that out later. Just tell him to go and get a coffee, and we'll talk to him in a minute. You better crack on with the draw though, Steve.
Okay. So first out the hat is Ice-T.
Oh, okay. Original Gangster.
Del the Funkee Homosapien.
That is an odd matchup, I won't lie. And that's you, Larry, first. You need to talk about this one.
Yeah, okay. I think it's kind of quite clear which way I'm gonna go. A very low ranking album compared to a pretty highly ranked album. I wish my brother George was here. Has scored over 4 on the patented Tru-Skore scoring matrix. There's lots of 4s and 5s in available here to listen to. Compare that to the other one, which is just full of, chock full of 2s and 3s, unfortunately. So shall I just I think I just have to go ahead and say that I wish my brother George was here is my pick for this round. I can't really string it out for much longer than that, if I'm being honest. Seems needlessly cruel to do so.
Yeah, it's just we're probably putting out his misery, I guess, isn't it?
I won't kick him out while he's down.
No, you don't want to do that to Ice-T. He'll shoot you. Look, my feelings on this matchup are pretty clear on these albums. You've got a stone cold top tenner for me in Del versus an album that I liked a lot less than I thought I did in Ice-T. So Yeah, I think. Look, I'm not going to string it out either because I think it's pretty obvious what I'm going to go for. So yeah, Dell gets my vote in this match. So Steve, it's down to you. Is it going to be a consolation goal for Ice-T?
Well, I think we've got the album that you would give to somebody to get them into hip hop, and then you've got the album that somebody might buy if they thought they liked hip hop but didn't have a clue about it. So I do.
They might listen to that one and never want to listen to hip hop again based on that, really.
I don't know. I think I probably liked this Ice-T album more than you two did, but maybe because I don't know. I've given him a kind of clean slate or something.
He is a complete legend as well, Ice-T. That's I won't kind of begrudge him that.
Yeah.
He is the OG, he is the original gangster.
Yeah.
And people use that phrase now to describe basically anything.
And he invented it.
But it's made its kind of made its way into sort of the common vernacular, hasn't it, OG?
Yeah, one of many achievements in his storied career.
I think this is classic Ice-T. I think it's just 1991 production, maybe pre-91 production, but and also it is good rapping, but it isn't a patch on I Wish My Brother George Was Here, which is great rapping and a great funky album. So it's a thrashing, isn't it?
It is. It's a 3-0. Can I just quickly get your thoughts on Pissing on Your Steps, which I meant to talk about earlier, and I don't think I did.
Oh, I love it.
I love that. He really does not like Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer, does he? Let's.
You know what? I have to confess something. I never really realised that it was about the dance steps that he was pissing on.
Yeah. I
didn't really get that until sort of quite recently. I thought it's a weird thing that's how you would disrespect someone by pissing on their actual steps.
Yeah,
I thought, but that's a brilliant track.
Love it. The beat and the lyrics and the subject matter just all marry into one amazing track. So I just had to mention that because I didn't talk about it earlier. Right, okay, let's move on to semi-final number 2, Steve, and whoever it was you had over there. Oh, Big Bang Hank.
Big Bang Hank, yeah. Right, so it's Ice Cube, Death Certificate.
Okay.
Against, NWA.
Oh, it happened.
For Zaggin.
It happened.
The one thing we didn't want to happen, to quote for our side.
Yeah.
Oh, Hank, how could you do that?
Hank doesn't know what he's done. That's why he's virtually skulking out of the studio. Look, he knows what he's done.
He's gone.
He's gone.
Left.
You're gonna have to load up. You're gonna have to load up another cartridge because you're gonna have to find somebody else. Is Ian right? Is Ian Wright still there?
Danny, I did actually want Eazy-E. Because it would have been really relevant for this year, but Sepp Blatter wouldn't allow it. Apparently, there's a comment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, not enough brown envelopes paid. Okay, so the second semi-final, Ice Cube versus NWA. I'm listening. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm a bit scared about talking about this one, but I'm gonna have to. I'm up first. So yeah, the clash of the ex-bandmates. I mean, it's pretty. I know it's a foregone conclusion with me because I've nailed my colours to the mast. And NWA is my favourite hip hop album of all time, and Death Certificate's probably my third favourite of all time. But I do think there's a kind of an equal amount of vitriol and energy and anger in both of these albums. And I think had Ice Cube's album been a bit more kind of had the Dre levels of production behind it, I think this would have been a closer thing. But I think NWA edges it for me because it's just got so much more going for it. It means so much more to me. It does different things to me when I listen to it. I love Ice Cube, and I do get those kind of chills when I listen to it, and it gets me going. I can, those beats and the rhymes and the anger, I love it, but it just doesn't come close to the feeling of listening to NWA, I'm afraid. NWA is just my album, so I'm just going to have to stay true to that. And NWA gets my vote. Let's go to Steve, you next. What are you going to go for? Is it a bit more difficult for you? No,
this couldn't be easier for me, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
I I'm trying to pin down. I'm still trying to pin down. Like I respect what you're both saying about Ice Cube and your love for this kind of album, and there are some great beats on it, but it's just nothing that I can kind of hook onto. And I sometimes think that you two have got this kind of just personal attachment from listening to it at the time that I don't have, that kind of influences you. So I'm trying to be objective as much as I can. But I just think when you put this against the NWA album, it just, Dr. Dre is just on another level, production-wise, on a completely different level. And though Ice Cube is a decent rapper, like we've said already, I'd quite happily hear Eazy-E, MC Ren and Dr. Dre, as much as Ice Cube, but if not more. So without kind of labouring the point anymore, it's E-Phil for Zaggin for me.
Okay, that's two for NWA. So this is probably a formality now, Larry, but what are you going for?
Yeah, it's a formality, but I think it's still worth... I mean, a couple of things to point out about this is that... I'm absolutely in love with both of these albums, and I think, and they're really different albums as well. Like they're sonically very different. I think Death Certificate is lyrically better. Like just on an objective kind of basis, it like NWA. The NWA album is very one note. Whereas Death Certificate just is not at all. It's actually a more serious kind of album thematically. It covers more ground. And Ice Cube, as much as I love the NWA rappers, I think most people just say that Ice Cube is the better rapper and this is his best album. So it's very difficult. But the NWA album, like you said, Dan, it's the way you feel when you listen to it. Even if you know that maybe even technically Death Certificate is the better album. And here's what's weird for me is that Death Certificate has come out higher on the Tru-Skore scale.
Let's dig into that. So what are the figures showing?
So Death Certificate, it's quite a close run thing, but Death Certificate has come out as a 4.23 on the scale. F-Phil for Zaggin is a 4.15.
Is that an overall reading for the album? Like an overall kind of...
This is going through track by track and assigning each one a numerical value and then averaging those scores. Not that that's only what Tru-Skore is. Don't think for a second it is just that. It's a lot more complicated. And a lot more...
I mean, it's linked to the stock markets and stuff, isn't it?
It links into the markets. You feed the periodic table into it. It's really complex stuff. But
3D printer as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, Death Certificate actually comes out higher, but I can't go with that score. Like this has happened before, hasn't it? Like the Tru-Score.
Controversial, Larry. It's very controversial.
I can't remember what else it came out as, but the thing is, Tru-Score, it's an unfeeling machine.
Cold.
There was that one time. I mean, I fitted a voice module to it recently. The one word it just said pain. And I had to turn it off after that. It's very, very distressing. It does have some kind...
Larry, you're like the anti-Chris Whitty. You're not led by the data. You're not led by the science. Not always led by the science.
But I do take it into account, but it's only there as guidance.
Yeah.
It's like they say in government that advisors advise, ministers decide, and that's kind of how I use the Tru-Skore system. I hope you use Real Rank in the same way.
Oh, absolutely, they're just guidelines. You got to go.
When it brings up a result like this, it does make you. Gives you pause for thought, but yeah, ultimately, although it's a foregone conclusion anyway, I have to go with F-Phil for Zaggin, or what Steve would describe as E-Phil for Zaggin.
We can talk about that later.
Sorry.
Controversy in the rap world.
But yeah, I do. It's an interesting point. I do think, technically, I think on many levels, Death Certificate is the better album, but it's a visceral thing you feel when you listen to NWA. Plus,
it's just I couldn't live without like having those beats in my life. It's all like, it's just musically. I love the Ice Cube album, but just musically, it is a source of intrigue for me. It's like the template to learn about how to put intricate hip hop music together in a way that I could never dream of kind of doing.
Yeah. And also the cherry on top of this particular cake is Admiral Dancehall, whose fingerprints are all over this. I mean,
man,
you know,
that last track, Days of Way Back, is one of my favourite tracks on that album. But I absolutely love it. But enhanced all the more by the presence of Admiral Dancehall, who went on to have a massive career. And there's no Admiral Dancehall on Death Certificate, is there? No, absolutely. I think that's much to its detriment. Right, well there you go. He had like a ragga type of person on Wicked. On Wicked, yeah, Don Jaguar. Don Jaguar. Yeah. Oh, he's didn't. No Admiral Dancehall, though, is he? No, he's not. I'd love to see like a showdown between their albums, but that's for another podcast. So yeah, there we go. That's our winner of the second semi-final, NWA. Okay, you join us here pitch side again at Wembley for the final of the Hip Hop World Cup 1991. Don't forget, coming up later, we've got an England legend live on the line to talk about our winning album. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be great. But for now, look, we've got our final, and it is NWA's F4 Zaggin versus Del, the Funkee Homosapiens. I wish my brother George was here. Gentlemen, I mean, two heavyweight albums, both West Coast. I think West Coast has been the best coast in this case, in this podcast certainly. It's seen off, it's seen off all the East Coast challenges. What are your overall thoughts about what we've seen here? It's been quite extraordinary stuff at times. When I looked at the lineup for this World Cup, I thought there were 3 albums that would probably get to the final. So it's these 2 plus Low End Theory. I think that they were always going to be the strongest ones. So it's great to see we've got a heavyweight final, and it's been a good World Cup. And I think that's the beauty of the World Cup, is you don't know who's going to get drawn in each round. So you lose some of the big guns, and there's been some really good battles. And yeah, looking forward to the final now. Yeah, and just very quickly, Larry, what are your thoughts on the final? Yeah, I think what's like the 4 albums that should have been in the semi-final: Death Certificate, F4 Zaggin, Low End Theory, and I Wish My Brother George Were Here. I think just it's worth mentioning they're all brilliant, but they're all really different sounding as well. It's a good year for unique sounding hip hop. There's lots of variety in here. Absolutely, yeah. No, it's been a great tournament, great variety. And actually, at this stage, it's probably worth just talking about some of the albums that didn't get in. That kind of came close, got knocked out in the qualifiers. So yeah, I mean, there's some big albums didn't make the cut, isn't that right, Steve? Have you got a couple there that you sort of would like to have seen in this competition? Yeah, I can't believe Breaking Atoms didn't get in here. The Main Source album, I think that's a really iconic 1991 album, and a bit of a kind of game changer for how hip hop sounded. Gangster seem to miss out every year, but we're talking about like one of the greatest producers of all time, and we can't seem to get his albums into the kind of hip hop World Cup finals. And I've got to mention it just because it's Tupac, but Tupacalypse Now, even though it's his worst album and it's not even a great album, I'm still going to give it an honorary mention. You will keep banging on that Tupac drum, won't you, until you get one in? What's he got left? He's got 96. All Eyes on Me. All Eyes on Me. It's got a shout. It's in with a shout. I reckon that might get in. It might 96, mightn't it? It might squeak in 96. Yeah, if it doesn't get in 96, there's something wrong with the world. But we shall see. Larry, were there any on your sort of didn't make it list? Yeah. I mean, now that we've been through the process, and I mean, it was always a bit of a head scratcher for me how Apocalypse 91 didn't get into this. But even now that we've been through it and fucking Ice-T and De La Soul got in above that, it's just like, it kind of, it calls into question the validity of the whole enterprise, to be honest, that wasn't in there. I love that album. It's kind of, it's not quite as good as the first, as kind of, you know, Fear of a Black Planet and Nation of Billions, but it's still a brilliant album. It's like their last great album. Apart from that, there's probably not really anything that I'm that gutted about not being in there. So yeah, that's really my only one, is Public Enemy. That really should have been in there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Listen, I'm going to keep this brief. But yeah, Public Enemy. Having seen some of the ones that did get in, I think it's criminal it didn't get in. I wish I'd have voted for it now. I think I went with heart rather than head on a lot of it, and I put Ice-T in. I think Public Enemy is better than Ice-T. I think Gangster, I think that should have been in the expense of a couple of the others as well. I wish I'd have kind of put that up there. I don't know what it is about Gangster. When I come to actually evaluating it and working out whether I want it to go in my top 10 that we do, in order to work it out, just something about it just holds me back. And I think it's Guru. I'm not sure, but it's just his rapping style, rest God rest his soul. But there's something about it. But I have the big one for me from 1991, and I know you two have absolutely no idea why I love this album so much, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's my guilty pleasure, second to none. DJ Quick production. I absolutely adore this album. I was obsessed with it back in the day. I'm still obsessed with it now. It sounds as good now as it did, back in the day. West Coast, Funkee. I absolutely love Second to None album, but I totally understand. I'm ploughing a lone furrow with that one because it's.
I think I would have, if I knew the album, I'm sure I would love it as well. But I've never bothered to kind of get into it. I can very easily imagine that it's better than Ice-T.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think you'd love it if you'd have been into it.
And probably Black Sheep as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Second to None is my big one. Terminator X and the Valley of the Jeep Beats. I also give a shout out for that because the first half of that album is absolutely dynamite, but unfortunately it tails off in the second half, which is why I couldn't quite. I'm quite happy for it not to be in here. And also the UMC's Fruits of Nature, and Not Even Nature's first album, Cypress Hill's first album, Third Base, second album. Love all of those, but not quite enough to have considered them for this. Cool. Right, okay, so let's move on to the final, which is NWA versus Del the Funkee Homosapien, an all West Coast affair. And Steve, you're up first on this one. What are your thoughts on this matchup? This is going to be a bit tougher.
Yeah, it's a bit tougher, isn't it? Yeah, you got this wonderful, funky, stylish, long player with. I wish my brother George was here. That just listens so well all the way through. Clever rapping, classic rapper, really great rapper. It's not a faultless album, but it is pretty good. And then the NWA album, I think I'm going to just go out and say it now. It is on a different level because you got Dr. Dre on there who just lifts everybody and anybody that he works with. There are some annoying bits on there, but I still like listening from the beginning to the end. It's not like necessarily like a guilty pleasure where you think, this is an album that's got some dodgy content on there that you shouldn't be listening to. It's NWA at the end of the day. It's got such kind of cultural significance. And,
you know what you're going to get, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. You know what you're going to get. You shouldn't feel guilty about it. You just enjoy it, and I always enjoy listening to this album. It's brilliant, and yeah, it's going to get my vote.
Cool. So that's one for that album. Larry, what are you saying? What are you going for in this?
I think just to kind of, I'd like to refer to the Tru-Scores here.
You've got to.
Just because they have come out like very close, and like Ethel Fazagin is a 4.15, and it's unfortunate for it because it's being dragged down by the two tracks on Ethel Fazagin, like I'd Rather F You and Automobile. which are kind of like 3.5s, 3s. Everything else is a kind of 4 or 5. And then I Wish Mother George was here. That has come out as a, where are we? 4.9 compared to 4.15. So there's not much in it at all.
Did you apply any specific modelling to the software before you punched these albums
just,
in?
Economic data, historical kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a plug-in, wasn't it?
Fed it, like put some prune juice in it as well, just to kind of get it like to move the parts through, get it nice and lubricated. But so yeah, they're a lot closer than I would have kind of given them credit for.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really kind of it upsets me to have to. I don't think I Wish Brother George was here really should be in the final. I think really it should be NWA versus Death Certificate. That's the kind of obvious
or Tribe
for me, or Tribe maybe.
Should be Tribe.
It's just the way the balls come out of the bag, you know. It's just
it is, and I think ultimately I'm always given the choice. I'm always drawn to harder, more kind of serious, weighty stuff.
Yeah,
and that's why on this occasion, I think it's obvious that I'm going to go for Funkee anyway. But yeah, I don't like having to say no to Del on this occasion. It's a brilliant album. I love it. I'd happily listen to them both.
Yeah,
but you've got to take a desert island disc kind of approach to this. I think.
Yeah,
like if you had to only pick one to listen to for the rest of your life, it's got to be NWA. Just it's so musically great. It's
a very satisfying album. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just more complex, more to it.
Yeah. So what do I think about this final? I mean, it's I think in an ideal world you would have had NWA versus Tribe in here. Would have been good old East versus West battle in the final. But it is what it is. Del's found his way through. I will say, as much as I've said that NWO is my favourite album of all time, I do think Del is a more cohesive album. I think it's tighter. I think it's got a better flow to it. The sequencing is probably a bit better. It's not broken up by some of those skitty type tracks, that NWA indulged themselves in. And also Del inspires some of the same feelings in me when I listen to it than NWA does. Not to the same level, not to the same intensity, but like earlier I was walking around, doing stuff around the house. I had Del on and I was like, it was giving me those chills. Like, I love that bit. I love the way he phrases that and the beat when it comes in and just brings back all these memories of listening to it back in the day. So it does give me that same feeling of excitement, which is what I'm looking for, But I think at the end of the day, it's no surprise to anyone that NWA is my album. It's my favourite hip hop album of all time, and as strong as they both are, I do think that I would have to vote for NWA in this instance, just because of what it means to me and how obsessed we've been by it, Larry, over the last God knows how many years. Yeah. So.
Who would have won this competition in if 100 random hip hop fans who like golden age stuff? I don't think Ethel Zaggin would have come anywhere near.
Oh, Tribe, 100%.
I wonder who would have won.
Yeah.
Tribe.
Do you think?
Yeah, 100%.
I would say Death Certificate personally.
I don't think that's held up in as high esteem as Tribe. I think I think Tribe appeals to people outside of the core hardcore hip hop fans as well. I think there's a sort of a more niche fan base for Death Certificate. I personally believe that, but I think hands down Tribe.
Yeah, Low End Theory is more accessible. The Death Certificate way more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. So
there are lots of good albums this year.
Oh, brilliant! I mean, as I say, it's my favourite year of the golden era. There's so many great albums. Yeah, the four in my top 10: NWA, Del, Tribe, and the other one was Ice Cube. So yeah, I mean, such a strong year. So I really enjoyed doing this one actually, and I think that it was a worthy winner in the end. I'm really happy about it. But and I think there's somebody else who might be happy about the winner, who we're going to go over to now live. Genuinely, really excited about this to have him on the line. England legend, ex-England and Tottenham midfielder, Paul Gaza Gascoigne, joining us live on the line. Paul, look, I know we haven't got much time. There's so much I want to ask you about. You're an absolute hero of mine. Look, so cast your mind back, Italia 90. You're out there on the pitch. You just sort of learned you weren't going to be playing in the final. Tears in your eyes. Gary Lineker's telling Bobby Robson to have a word with you, etc., etc. Had you known that just a year later we would have had such a strong year of hip hop, and I know you're a big hip hop fan, do you think it would have softened the blows slightly? Do you think you might not have been quite so upset about not being able to play in the World Cup final, or do you think you would have felt the same way anyway? What are your thoughts on that, Paul? Paul? You there, Paul? Gaza?
I know, is he gone?
I was made promises about this phone line that have not been kept. I'm going to have to sort that out for the next one. I'm gutted about that because I was so excited. He's been on the line for the whole 2 hours we've been on.
Was he calling from a pub?
Well, he said something about taking he was going out with a fishing rod and a bit of chicken for somebody he knows. Yeah, I'm really gutted about that. That's 2 episodes in a row.
Like, even if it gives him some insight, because he's been known to rap himself, hasn't he? Like, he's on had that fog on the Tyne.
Yeah, exactly. Occasionally,
and
on that open top bus with a pair of plastic tits on.
Yeah.
Around that sort of era. That's a real shame. There was loads of stuff I wanted to ask him about. Never mind. All right. Well, I'm sure he would have.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, I'm sure he would have shared our excitement about NWA winning and shared some tales with us. Never mind. Okay, maybe next time. Look, that's it then. So our winner is NWA's FL4 Zagin. Look, if you agree with us or disagree with us with our winner, or you just want to share your thoughts on 90s hip hop in general, then hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Hip Hop World Cup. But for now, thank you for listening, and until the next episode, we're ghosts like Patrick Swayze.